The human element is often seen as the weakest link in cybersecurity. This idea is based on the belief that human behavior and awareness may not be as strong as the technical aspects of cybersecurity. Cyberspace is rapidly expanding and affecting society in various ways. The pervasive nature of cyber threats presents a significant challenge to governments, businesses, organizations, and individual users. Unfortunately, the South African context has not given enough attention to cybersecurity awareness as an emerging threat. This calls for urgent exploration of how the human element can adapt and improve the online security behavior. In this webinar, Dr. Calpesto will talk about both cybersecurity as a source of vulnerability and a strength. Dr. Calpeste is a registered research psychologist and senior psychology lecturer and has 8 years of professional experience. He functions as a senior psychology lecturer at the University of South Africa, Unisa, and specialises in cybersecurity awareness in the South African Armed Forces context. He completed his PhD in military science at Stellenbosch University in 2023. He serves as an executive committee member in the Division of Research and Methodology, DRM, at the Psychological Society of South Africa. His research interests include military science, data colonialism, awareness, and security. He has presented papers both locally and internationally, and is also a product of the Emerging Psychology Programme hosted in Prague. Over to Dr. Carl Bester. We are handing over to the presenter. So, Dr. Carpester, enjoy and thank you so much for your time. As an executive member, we really do appreciate all the effort that you put in.
Thank
Over
you
to
so much.
you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Just to confirm, are you seeing the presenter screen and not the notes?
I see the presenter screen. Yes, thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Just to reiterate, I am not family of Thabo Bester. So if everyone was wondering, I'm not family. But anyway, today's topic really focuses on the idea of the human taking the center of the cybersecurity chain. And oftentimes we think about cybersecurity as this technical, domain, full of numbers and nodes and ones and zeros and hard drives and CPUs. But in actual fact, it is a blend of the digital space and the physical space. And the human finds itself within the physical space interacting with the digital space. But oftentimes we are vulnerable and susceptible to cyber attackers, cyber threats, but also even physical vulnerabilities in our space that extends into the digital realm as well. Okay, so today's presentation, a webinar, really focuses on the idea of the definition of cybersecurity. How do we locate the human element within this highly technical domain? Then I focus on the idea of cyberspace as a domain and more in the sense of what is the impact of it and what is the local impact in the South African context. And then we're looking at the recent cyber attacks in South Africa. And you'll also see that if you do yourself a favor and you read the research articles or the articles posted about cyber attacks, the South African government takes a stance of not admitting that there is an attack, but oftentimes it lends itself to the idea that it's an alleged attack. But that also draws the attention to the idea that it takes some time to identify and detect cyber attacks. And then oftentimes we are left with the consequences of what happens with my data and what now. And then we focus on the human element, the cybersecurity kill chain, and we're looking at the vulnerabilities in the steps of where the human may find itself, but also the vulnerability and and then we will focus on the idea of risk perception and why risk perception is so important and risk information. And then ultimately, where does psychology locate itself? Okay. So in this rapidly evolving realm of cybersecurity, the primary focus is on technological advancements and the development of sophisticated defense mechanisms to safeguard digital infrastructures. Now, while these technical aspects are undoubtedly crucial, there is an equally important, albeit often overlooked dimension, which is the human element or the human factor. So cybersecurity encompasses more than just codes, algorithms, but more so the human mind plays a very important role in both the creation and prevention of cyber threats. But now we require a more nuanced understanding of human behavior, and how we can enhance cybersecurity measures. But this can only be done by understanding the psychological underpinnings of cybersecurity, right? So why psychology takes a very important role in the cybersecurity chain, we need to explore the motivations of cyber criminals or cyber attackers or the nefarious actors so that we can better understand and anticipate and mitigate potential threats, but also the threat actors. Hence, the positioning of psychology within the cybersecurity awareness domain does not just rest on the idea that the human element is vulnerable, but also alludes to the idea that we have the ability to exploit systems, but also users of those particular systems. So as we better understand cyber threats and defense strategies in the South African context, it becomes evident that psychological principles are not just helpful, but really essential in understanding cybersecurity awareness, but also understanding psychology within cybersecurity. So now this webinar aims to bridge the gap between technical expertise with a technical idea of what cyber is and the psychological insight by almost recognizing and acknowledging the human behavior's critical role or crucial role in shaping this digital era's security environment. And as I indicated in my introduction, oftentimes we consider the cybersecurity as a technical discipline, technical domain, and to a certain extent it is. If I have to look back at my experience going to different countries, like for example China, there's an emphasis on the neurocognitive approach towards positioning the human element within cybersecurity. So psychology is more considered to be a hard science in relation to cybersecurity, and they integrate the two. Whereas the presentations focus, or the focus of cybersecurity awareness in the South African context is more leaning towards a social psychology perspective. And that is where this definition comes in. So cybersecurity is a flexible security process through which individuals constantly interact with a technical environment within their social context. Cybersecurity is also the immersive process through which the human element or the human factor utilizes security software, tools in tandem with one education, training, guidelines, technical knowledge, and best practices such as awareness training, technical skills, and risk assessments. So cybersecurity requires the notion of applying knowledge to risk perception and precautionary behavior while being fully aware of the vulnerabilities in both the physical and the cyberspace domain. And ultimately, what I mean by this definition is that cybersecurity is the outcome of security. And in order to do security, we need to speak security. So the idea of living cybersecurity should be entrenched in our lives, not only just by attending a one-size-fits-all training that covers the organization's approach to cybersecurity, but also to really integrate it in our daily lives and the way we conduct our banking, how we generally conduct ourselves in cyberspace. One of the terms that's really emerging in the South African context is the idea of cyber hygiene or cyber safety. And cyber hygiene really speaks about the idea of incorporating the idea of cleanliness in our digital spaces. So we have cleanliness on our digital devices. We can see where these threats are clearly located. We can see the information on our desktops. We know where information is stored. So once the attack or threat happens, we are not completely surprised what information is lost, how it was lost. So that is the idea of this particular definition. It's the idea that the human element or the human factor is completely immersed in the idea of when I practice cybersecurity, I'm aware of some knowledge. I'm aware of the idea of how I interpret risk. So cyberspace and some more. So the terms cyberspace and the internet have been really used interchangeably to refer to humans or users navigating the online digital space. So cyberspace is, from my perspective, is an umbrella concept. An umbrella concept includes the internet, the dark web, the deep web, and all of those particular levels of this digital space, this ephemeral space that's all around us that we cannot see. Now, cyberspace has profoundly impacted society as it allows for instant communication and facilitates new ways in which commerce may take place. Along with the impact cyber made on the interaction between individuals, it also sparked its continuous growth in cyberspace. Now, with the expansion of cyberspace, cyber threats are becoming more diverse in the types, but also the source of actors. And if you look at the statistics of cyber threats in the South African context, this has really been exacerbated since COVID-19. And another thing you have to look at it from an organizational point of view, the dynamic of BYOD, bring your own device to work, also enables this idea of threats stemming over from the organizational context, but also into the personal context and vice versa. If I have to link it back to the COVID example, since the inception of COVID-19, we've seen more users being connected to the internet, and rightly so, because we had to engage in remote working conditions. But oftentimes when the remote working conditions took place, our systems at home and our approach to actually being cybersecurity aware was not really on a point where it was considered to be adequate. And therefore, the amount of cyber threats that we experience, or cyber attacks that we've experienced, malware, ransomware, increased activity in bots, was this as a result of inadequate hardware or system inadequacies in our own personal devices or our security measures that we've taken at home. Yeah, so it is argued that people have become more dependent on the physical and virtual components of cyber, which may have invited unpredicted vulnerabilities resulting in data exposures. Okay, so as technology and the complexity of the internet continue to expand into society, so does the nature of cyber threats and attacks. Now, with this expansion in mind, people are changing the way in which they choose to perform their daily activities, which may have far-reaching consequences in that they may have an impact on governments, businesses, banks, and everyday internet users. Now, malicious software is relatively cheap and can be obtained by anyone who has a technological device or phone or laptop and who has access to the appropriate platform to acquire such malicious tools. Now, these software tools could also be used to exploit vulnerabilities in computer systems and data systems that are able to destabilize governmental information structures, disrupt banking systems, threaten national defense structures, and interfere with the processes to secure the information of users. Now, the disrupting the flow of data and capability of systems may ultimately also have an impact on the digital dependence and behavior of users. Okay. So, nefarious actors have increasingly mentioned South Africa on the dark web since 2016. So, there's this perception that South Africa is a playground for cyber attackers, your hackers, your hacktivists. And the target, that the country is a target, and its citizens, businesses, and organizations are placed at risk as a result of this perception from hacker groups. Now, considering the above mentioned threat, right, one should focus on the context of cybersecurity in South Africa much more, specifically because the cybersecurity component depends on human interaction. And moreover, highly notable cyber attacks have been observed in South Africa, such as the Justice Department that suffered a cyber incident that took place during 2024, this year, May. So now this attack resulted in the exposure of thousands of users' data and impacting the payouts of child maintenance beneficiaries. And in the same breath, the department also fell victim to a ransomware attack in 2021, impacting core data. Now, this also demonstrates the ease in which threats can take place, how threats recur in that particular context, and how state organizations are able to be placed in a vulnerable position, but also our data. So now the question becomes, how do we protect ourselves and our data? Right? We have existing policies. We've got the NCPF, we have got the Cybercrimes Bill, we've got the POPI Act. All of those feed into the idea that the state is in the process of securitizing this particular threat, that the threat is real, the threat has been acknowledged, so therefore we have policies and guidelines and best practices in place to secure your data when it is being compromised. Now, cyber activity in the South African context has seen a significant increase, both in positive but also in a negative sense. And its effects have been highlighted in both the economic and social political context of South Africa. Now, the government is relying on ICT platforms to an increasing degree to extend its cybersecurity reach into the economic but also socio-political sectors. However, the effects of cyber threats may have some longer-term implications for the financial and industrial sector, specifically where critical infrastructure is involved. We have to give an example. Think about the maritime industry that also had a cyber attack a couple of years ago, which halted all activity within our ports, which had significant impacts on our economy as well. So cyber threats such as malware, card not present, or CNP, or credit card fraud and online banking fraud were some of the main challenges, security challenges experienced during the period of 2019, but also 2023. And it increased during the COVID-19 pandemic due to the increase in online presence of users, and as a result of remote working condition, but also inadequate security measures by its users. In addition, cyber threats do not only pose a challenge for national security, but also for ordinary users. Now, ultimately, this can it can be highlighted that collectively, cyber attacks and cyber threats are disruptive to South African society. But now one may also argue that while critical infrastructure and security technology such as your software and your hardware might be in place, it only contributes minimally to the larger cybersecurity challenge that we are facing in our country. The security technology used in organization is only as strong as the human factor. What this implies is that if an employee is unaware of certain features of cyber threats, it may leave the organization's information and systems vulnerable. Now, despite the security technology that is in place, users may also still be exposed to threats if they are not adequately aware or skilled in cybersecurity threats, but also the basic knowledge of having security online behavior. Now, therefore, the human factor might place an individual or user and its organization at risk due to the idea that there may be limited awareness, but also knowledge. So there's definitely emphasis on creating awareness within this particular domain. But now there are also other types of threats that may challenge the security of organizations, but also its users. So these include threats such as malicious emails, ransomware, and theft of mobile devices and laptops. So South Africa experiences about 577 malware attacks per hour, which is quite high. Now, in addition, ransomware is also available on the dark web for 1,700 Rand, which may pose significant risks, not only for its users, but also for national security, as the purchase of these malicious software is easily achieved. Okay. And as I mentioned about the maritime attacks, and I mentioned about the Justice System Department's attack as well, the recent cyber attacks in South Africa include, and this is just 2024 alone, it's the alleged data breach of the pension fund, which may also cause significant distress for people. So therefore, we also have this notion that cyber attacks often have offline implications, because sometimes we think about cyber attacks only happening or having an impact in the digital space, but we are sitting with the end result. We are sitting with the issues that these particular attacks present to us. Then another attack that happened was the 300 million rand cyber attack on the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and this happened in May 2024, so it's not long ago. And that is a significant amount of money. One of the things that the cyber crimes bill speaks of, but also the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework speaks about, is the idea that national critical infrastructure is crucial for the functioning of South Africa. And therefore, the security cluster, or the actors within the security cluster, have to be responsible to address these particular threats that pose significant issues for national security, but also the inhabitants of the nation state. The third attack that was quite notable was the ransomware attack on South Africa's National Health Laboratory Service. So this has an impact on how we process data, but also the blood samples that we send to these particular labs. So that had an impact as well. And then the other day, I opened my laptop and then I saw, wait a minute, the SNDF is hacked again. But this time it was an alleged system breach, but not a system breach. Essentially what happened was the data management system was put in a very vulnerable position of the SNDF. Where one of the consultants or used open source Wi-Fi for the data management systems on, and this may have a significant impact on national security because sensitive organizational data may be exposed to cyberspace and nefarious actors. And this is the second time that has happened within a span of 2 years. So this is quite significant in that particular aspect, because it brings up the idea that how do we consider national security to be effective if the actors within the security clusters are themselves falling victim to the pervasive nature of cyber threats, but also the attacks. And here we get into the fun part, the weakest link. So there are 4 central reasons that underpin the human factor being the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain. Now, the human element can be misled by nefarious actors online into forcing them to disclose sensitive information by targeting human psychological vulnerabilities. For example, the idea of trust. Trust is essential within organizations, but also essential when we navigate cyberspace, because we've got this belief that once we switch on the computer or a laptop or a mobile device, that the current safety mechanisms that's employed by this particular mobile device or the third-party software that we download is sufficient enough for protecting our information. But as research and as history would have it, it is not always sufficient in addressing our cyber safety. Number 2, the internet is integrated into our everyday lives, such as the use of mobile devices. The cell phone and the mobile device is an extension of my arm. Therefore, it is me. So if I have to think about it logically, my functioning in the physical space can also be represented and reflected in my functioning within the digital space. You can think about that, and we can engage about that afterwards as well. 3, the human element can also be vulnerable and create involuntary points of access for malicious software into organizational networks. Number 4, the increased importance placed on information security and how users respond to threats is compromised or will be compromised if security protocols and security behavior are not actively applied. If I have to think about the last 3 points or the last 2 points of how the physical space extends into the virtual space, we have this idea that our security and our network security and our systems may be compromised through bots and through malicious software. But what if, for example, I'm a malicious actor, but I have specific key logs that are particularly processed on a USB device. I drop my USB device in a toilet, and because I pre-programmed the particular key loggings on that USB device, someone else picks it up and says, hey, let me insert that into my laptop, because who doesn't need an extra USB device? Suddenly, I would have access to that individual's information because their device registers that particular USB not as a USB, but as a keyboard. And that allows me to get access to your passwords, your information, your data, but also later on getting backdoor access into your particular device. And that is quite scary. But that also brings up the idea of the physical space intersecting with the digital space as well. And now we're getting to the cybersecurity chain. So there are many phases in the cybersecurity kill chain, right? We first have the idea of reconnaissance. So the intruder selects a target, they research it, and it attempts to identify certain vulnerabilities, not only in the target network, but also in the vulnerability of specific individuals and how the behavior, how the security behavior is actually employed or executed. Number two, weaponization. So the nefarious actor creates remote access through the use of a malware software such as a virus or a worm that is tailored to one or more vulnerabilities. So for example, phishing, I know that the people in my organization would love shopping, so I would bombard them with emails or fake emails targeting their shopping behavior or what they would like, but it's fake sites. So I know that that is particularly a source of vulnerability. Another source of vulnerability may also be fake sites related to cars. If cars is my interest, I would create a fake site related to cars.com, for example. So that would be a way in which the intruder or nefarious actor can actually sum up my security behavior within the workspace, but also get a larger idea of the members in the organization's security behavior, but also internet pattern use. Number three, delivery. The nefarious actor transmits a particular malware weapon via your email attachments, websites, or USB drives, as I just mentioned the example. Number four, exploitation. Malware software or the weapon that the nefarious actor launches triggers a particular code, which may have a particular action on your network, but also exploit the vulnerability of the user and the larger network system. Number five, installation. So malware, the intruder then installs this particular malware weapon through backdoor access, which is usually accessible by only the intruder. Number six, command and control. So this particular malware or the intruder would then have hands on your keyboard, and may also it will also persist in having access to that particular target network. So as I mentioned that example about USB being pre-programmed to actually act as a keyboard, this is that example. So this may either take the form of a digital approach, but it may also take the form of a physical approach where it would require the involuntary user to actually insert a foreign USB device into that particular laptop. And then actions and objective. So the nefarious actor takes action to achieve their particular goal, such as data exfiltration, data destruction, or encryption for a particular ransom. Now, there is a barrage of studies focusing on the technical features of cyber security and the cyber kill chain. But now few studies have actually emphasized the role of the human element, focusing on the cognitive features and situational awareness when operating within cyberspace. Now, cyber attackers may also manipulate the minds of users, and you would see that it would usually happen during the first and the second stage, reconnaissance and the weaponization. And they would rather target the minds of users and the psychology of users than the computer system itself. For example, the nefarious actor may use the form of social engineering, so tricking of the computer system user to gain information such as passwords, but they may also use cognitive hacking, such as the spreading of misinformation or to break into a network or computer system. And oftentimes when it deals with cognitive hacking, the idea of perceptions come into play. And oftentimes it happens during the election campaigns. So if you are particularly aligned to a specific political ideology and you want to align yourself to this particular group, but on this particular page, it says, go to this link and click here. And I need your details. So you fill in your particular personal details, such as your name, your surname, ID number. But what happens with that data? Legally, they are supposed to indicate what this data will be used for, but because we are so entrenched in our political ideology or pursuing that political ideology and advancing that in our own particular social system, we tend to avoid or ignore certain best practices. Now, some errors related to cyber and network security include, but are not limited to, sharing of passwords, oversharing information on social media, accessing suspicious website, using unauthorized external media, indiscriminate clicking on links, reusing the same passwords in multiple places, even though we know it's wrong. It's also easier for us because it makes us function easier, gets us things done easier than remembering multiple passwords. Another aspect is opening an attachment from an untrusted source, sending sensitive information via mobile networks, and not physically securing personal electronic devices, and not updating your security software. Now, along these lines, one of the main issues underlying information in cybersecurity is the dilemma of increasing the availability and ease to access a network or data, but at the same time also to maintain security. Right? Now, there are three types of human security errors. One is to fall victim to phishing, sharing of passwords with others, and installing software updates that are not authentic and that are not particularly acknowledged or recognized by your organization. Okay. Risk perception. Now, the presentation of information is fundamental in establishing a foundation through which an individual may assess the idea of preference, which in turn may have an impact on the behavior that is being exercised and displayed. Now, exploring the role of perception and the notion of risk is essential as it allows for us to point out exactly how users interpret various objects and events of risk. Now, this view is also echoed in the rising cyber threat rate that we're experiencing in a South African context, which amplifies the importance of the human element and the idea of perception within the cybersecurity discipline. Now, the social context has a very strong role in the creation of perception, and as a result of risk information and how that is particularly experienced and perceived by people. So if I come from a context where I don't necessarily appreciate the idea of being cautious in cyberspace, my behavior will dictate that when a risk appears or a threat is presenting itself within cyberspace, that I will simply ignore it because that's how I've learned in my social space, and that's how I have interpreted risk within my particular social context. Right? So it is worth noting that positive perceptions that are linked to organizational change is associated with the idea with information sharing practices that can be ascribed to efficiency. Right? So what that essentially means is that if I am positive, I will align myself to the particular laws and guidelines and best practices that my organization have set for myself, but also the best practices and laws and guidelines that have been conveyed outside of my organization. Okay. Risk perception and awareness training. So there are five things actually that are very important. It's the idea of saliency, clarity, certainty, culture, and knowledge. Now, these five factors are very crucial in the idea of understanding risk perception, but also how it links to the idea of creating cyber security awareness. Now, owing to the emergence of some cyber threats, people may sometimes overstress them, and this may particularly occur when different fragments of information concerning contemporary and new threats are shared online. Now, furthermore, the aspect of saliency comes into play when referring to the perception of risk information. Now, saliency in risk information is important when viewing the relationship between the severity of events and how it is accepted by individuals or users. So this means that when the information about threats is made available, the manner in which the threat information is interpreted by individuals may also impact their perception of risk. However, this can also be argued that low levels of awareness and a lack of clarity on the threat or incident may also result in undermining the magnitude of the particular cyber threat. Now, it is suggested that risk perception is a complex construct that is regulated by behavior and cognition, which often may have an impact on decision making, causing feelings of fear and guilt, as well as establishing a sense of trust or mistrust. Now, the mode through which risk information is communicated has the potential to establish awareness, but also foster knowledge regarding cybersecurity, which may in turn also assist in establishing the perception whether an individual is applying the necessary precautionary behavior or security behavior online. Now, the element of uncertainty is strongly associated with the aspect of risk. Now, risk and behavior, along with the aspect of psychological uncertainty, could arguably also be regarded as important factors when individuals respond to certain situations that may have consequences. And I have to bring an idea of organizational culture. Now, organizational culture might be a very strong predictor of how user perceptions are also constructed. So this is, of course, true because we spend a large chunk of our life doing work and being in an organizational setting. So the idea of innovation and pioneering as facets are identified as significant features of an organization's ability to pursue technological but also digital transformation, as it enables an environment where its employees are capable of fostering behavior and adopting values that are inherent of a digitized culture. So if we have a digitized culture, we may also have the idea of a security culture within our organization, and those two go hand in hand. Now, the creation of knowledge may also influence the notion of employee perceptions, but also the approach to engaging with outsiders and sharing information. And this deals with the idea of trust. Now, when employees are exposed to awareness training, the understanding of why third-party software applications and why these particular software applications may put people at risk will occur, right? So they will be able to identify the risk associated, but also how that impacts their own security behavior. So where does psychology fit in? So I brought it out to two aspects. One is exploring the mind of the cyber attacker, but also the nefarious actor. Two, it's to develop a more a cybersecurity approach that is informed by psychology. Okay, so cybersecurity ultimately revolves around human behavior, right? And it's just as the refresher. And it does not just focus on the idea of preventing attacks, but it also alludes to the idea of understanding the motivations behind them. So online attacks may stem from a wide range of motives, including financial gain and ideological beliefs. Therefore, gaining insights in the psychological profiles and motivations of cyber criminals are crucial for devising robust security strategies. Now, I've got three things: understanding motivations, creating psychological profiles, and understanding the idea of social engineering and manipulation. And that is where the idea of psychology will fit in. So cyber attacks are often motivated by a variety of factors. So while financial gain is a major driving force, leading individuals to partake or users to partake in activities such as ransomware attacks, identity theft, and financial fraud, there are also other motives that may be at play. So some cyber criminals are propelled by strong religious convictions, seeking to disrupt companies or governments they perceive as particular rivals. There are also those that are motivated by the challenge of circumventing certain security measures or structures that are in place, right? So they may view the actions as a demonstration of skill and ingenuity. You can also go back to the SNDF attack that happened about, I think it was 2 years ago, where the attackers came out and said, well, we are going to contact the media because the organization is not acknowledging that there was an attack. And that also alludes to the idea of South Africa being a playground for certain nefarious actors. Now, the psychology within this idea of understanding motives, right? We can also see and also unpack the idea of where's the thrill, within this pursuit, or the desire for recognition, within certain specific activist communities, right? What motivates the hacker, and what is the ultimate goal that they would like to achieve? And number two, psychological profile. So cyber criminals often exhibit common psychological traits that contribute to their online activities. Now, they frequently display a propensity of risk-taking behavior. Now, this is demonstrated in the idea of their readiness to participate in potentially lucrative endeavors, despite the legal and personal ramifications. They may also rely on their problem-solving abilities to maneuver through intricate security systems in order to accomplish their particular objectives or goals. Now, the digital environment may also desensitize individuals or users to diminish their concern for the moral and ethical consequences of their particular actions. And there's a big debate, and I know it's not related to this, but if you have to link it to the idea of a drone pilot that operates in cyberspace and controls this particular machine through cyberspace, it also presents an idea of a moral, but also an ethical dilemma, which goes hand in hand in this particular point as well. Number three, social engineering and manipulation. So cybercrime involves the exploitation of the human psychology through social engineering tactics, such as social engineering, right? Exploiting the idea of my particular trust in cyberspace. So cyber criminals, they manipulate emotions such as fear, curiosity, but an idea of trust to deceive individuals or users into divulging confidential information or granting access to secure systems. Oftentimes, phishing attacks, for example, may rely on instilling a sense of urgency, authenticity to compel the victim to take action. If I have to link it to an example, if I get a spam email that tells me, Carl, I saw you engaging in this particular act through your webcam. So automatically it would instill a sense of fear in my behavior, because I don't want other people to see what I'm doing. So I don't want to be humiliated. I don't want to face my peers in my social space if this information ever had to get out, for example. So the attacker or nefarious actor exploits this emotion to get a particular unit from me. And I say unit, for example, if I say, or have monetary gain, for example. Okay. And the last point, developing a centered psychology strategy. Now, understanding human behavior is very important. It's just as important, for example, as mastering technological solutions. And this is where the intersection of psychology and cybersecurity really comes into play. A cybersecurity strategy that relies on psychological insights may help organizations, but also users to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber threats. Now, using behavioral analytics and creating a security culture based on psychological safety are influential parts of creating this particular plan. Number one, awareness and training. Now, any security strategy must include the idea of cybersecurity awareness and training programs. Now, their effectiveness is greatly increased when they are designed with an understanding of human psychology in mind, or placing the human at the center of that particular training strategy. So training should consider common cognitive biases and heuristics, which may also help individuals to better recognize and resist certain social engineering tactics by the nefarious active examples. We may also include programs that replicate phishing attacks in a control setting that have the potential to desensitize employees to the urgency and apprehension tactics employed by the attackers, which may also reduce the likelihood of deception taking place. So the human firewall against cyber threats can be strengthened by the idea of training that fosters personal responsibility, but also collective vigilance. But it also boils down to the idea that cybersecurity training and awareness is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it has to be tailored uniquely to the individual's needs, but also the organization's needs. So it has to be purpose fit. Number two, the role of behavioral analytics. Now, this can greatly enhance security by monitoring certain deviations established from the patterns already created by user within their system. So oftentimes we look at the behavior, and this may indicate whether the behavior is a potential security risk or a threat. Now, the premise around this is to assume that the human behavior, even when interacting with digital platforms, exhibits predictable patterns that can be simulated, but also predicted. Now, these patterns show that users are accessing files, particularly at odd times, or trying to enter secure areas without permission. Right? So a powerful tool for anticipation, for threat detection is also often depicted within behavioral analytics. So this could really bring together the idea of psychology and technology. And then last point, psychological safety and security culture. Now, the importance of cultivating a culture of psychology, for example, a culture of security that is centered around psychology is recognized by this particular strategy, right? So it is important to center the human element within notions of safety, but also security culture. And it's important to create a safe environment where users can mention their worries and admit their mistakes and ask questions without worrying about being punished. For example, if I share information about my organization or sensitive data, is my environment created in such a way where it is not punitive, but rather building me and developing me to such an extent where it's okay. We are allowed to make mistakes. It's all part of enhancing cybersecurity awareness within my organization. Yeah. So the establishment of a security culture should prioritize transparency, embracing failure, but also taking collective accountability, which may significantly enhance a user's defense posture, but also an organization's defense posture. Okay? And I conclude. So So psychology is pivotal in cybersecurity, just as human behavior often represents the weakest link in a digital defense structure. So we can leverage psychological insights, and our organizations may design more effective training programs that may enhance user awareness and reduce vulnerabilities to social engineering. But the significant part of all of this is that we need to prioritize the psychology with an understanding of creating a cybersecurity awareness program that is robust but also resilient and that is purpose fit for users and people in organizational context. Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the questions and answer section. Thank you so much, Dr. Bester, for the amazing presentation. It's always important for us as people that use cyberspace to be aware of these things. Very important presentation. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of today's amazing webinar. And from myself, Fatima Peters, thank you so much, Dr. Bester, for the webinar, and to all our attendees today. Thank you so much.